Burnout, The Secret to Unlocking the Cycle. Emily Nagoski and Amelia Nagoski. Ballantine Books, 2020. Many useful tips too. Support every woman who feels exhausted and overwhelmed by all the tasks on her plate and is still worried that she is not doing enough. Learn to treat ourselves with more compassion and to interpret the signals that our body sends us to minimize stress. Become aware of how the patriarchal society in which we live unconsciously affects us from an early age. The author. Emily Nagoski has a PhD in health behaviour with a focus on human sexuality and a master's degree in psychological counselling. She also did a clinical internship on sexual health at the Kinsey Institute Sexual Health Clinic. She is the award-winning author of the New York Times bestseller Come As You Are, the surprising new science that will transform your sex life. She has been a sex educator for 20 years and is an expert in healthy relationships and in the prevention of sexual violence and harassment. She currently works as director of the Smith College Center for Wellness Education. Amelia Nagoski has a doctorate in musical arts and is an orchestral conductor. She is assistant musical coordinator at Western New England University. She often holds sessions for other professional musicians on the application of communication sciences and psychological research. What is burnout and the human giver syndrome? The technical term burnout was first used in 1975 by Herbert Freudenberger, who defined it using 3 characteristics. Emotional exhaustion, the fatigue that comes from caring too much for too long. Depersonalization, the depletion of empathy. Decreased sense of accomplishment, when it feels like nothing we do seems to make any difference. All too often, burnout coincides with what the philosopher Kate Mann defined as the human giver syndrome. Society is divided into human beings and caregivers, very often women, and the latter are often expected to voluntarily give their time, affection, attention, and their body to the former without needing anything or bothering anyone with their emotions. Caregivers cannot move through the emotional tunnel, meaning they are unable to process an emotion to its end, and so they remain stuck in the same emotion for long periods until they reach exhaustion. Stress and stressors. In order to properly define stress, we should distinguish between stress and stressors. Stress is the neurological and physiological response that is activated in our bodies when they are exposed to stressors. This is an evolutionary response present in all living beings. Stressors are elements or situations that activate stress in our bodies. For example, family, money, cultural norms, etc. Our body identifies them as potential threats. In the past, a stressor was likely to be an attack by a wild animal that would have activated a multi-systemic response in our bodies whose objective was to pump oxygen and energy to our muscles to prepare us to run away. In this scenario, there were 2 possible outcomes: being devoured by the wild animal or managing to escape to make it back to our village and celebrate our survival with our friends. In that case, our body would have understood that the threat had been dealt with, and so the stress cycle would be complete. In today's world, the type of stress has changed, but the cycle of stress that our body goes through is the same. Once we are free from our stressors, it is not over. The stress has to be managed, and we need to communicate to our bodies that the threat is gone, so that we can end its stress response. Burnout often comes about because of emotions that get stuck and hang around in our bodies for a long time, hindering us from completing the stress cycle. 3 of the most common reasons for not completing the stress cycle are chronic stressors. For example, a lion that waits for us every day, ready to hunt us and whom we need to run from, only to have to do it all over again the following day. This is when we are stuck in a situation that continually activates our stress response. Social adequacy. For example, when we are unable to follow the response to the stressor that is suggested by our body because it would go against norms of politeness and education, such as responding to a rude or sexist comment from our boss. Security. Sometimes it is safer for us not to reply to verbal harassment on the street so as not to make the situation worse. This is a survival strategy, but it puts off the body's need to complete the stress cycle. A special form of stress response is immobility or freeze. It happens when the brain analyzes a threat and decides that there is no way to flee or to fight, and so the only way to survive is to play dead. This is when it is impossible to move, and we get stuck. Our society could consider such a reaction to stress as weakness, but we need to understand that this is a natural response created in our bodies, and we should not feel guilty about it. The weapons we have to combat stress. First weapon, how to complete the cycle. As we mentioned before, stressors activate a stress response in our bodies that prepare us to flee, so what better way to complete the cycle than to do some sport? Movement communicates to our brain that the threat has been defeated and we are safe. Do 20 to 60 minutes of movement per day. Breathing can help when our stress levels reach their limit. Breathe in for a count of 5, hold your breath for a count of 5, and then breathe out for a count of 10. Pause for 5 seconds, and then do it again. Repeat this action 3 times. Positive social interactions such as laughter, showing affection to other human beings, 20-second hugs or 6-second kisses, or animals and spirituality, meaning feeling a connection to something bigger than us, can all communicate to the body that we are safe and sound. Having a good old cry doesn't change a situation, but it can bring a lot of relief. Creativity can help us to express our emotions and complete the cycle. There are lots of other ways to complete the stress cycle, and they differ for each of us. But the main rule is to do something, to tell our bodies that we are safe. For certain, telling ourselves that everything is okay doesn't work. The process of completing the cycle is not psychological, it is physical. We can identify stress signals that indicate the need to manage stress before we have to manage our stressors. Constantly repeating the same useless action with self-destructive behaviour. Repeatedly blowing up with anger and sudden bursts of pain and suffering. Hiding, such as spending the whole day on the sofa eating and watching TV. Constant illnesses such as chronic pain, wounds that won't heal, etc. Second weapon, how to manage the monitor and the stressors. The brain mechanism that manages the gap between where we are and where we are going is called the monitor, and it has a very clear idea about the balance between our objective, the effort it takes to reach it, and how close to it we are at any given moment. To make the monitor happy, we need a balance of less effort and more progress. However, when the opposite happens, more effort and less progress, our monitor melts down and creates a sense of frustration within us. Once we have understood how the monitor works, we can manage controllable and uncontrollable stressors. Strategies. Problem solving is the right strategy for controllable stressors. You need to analyze the situation and create a plan. For example, if you are looking for a job, you can put into practice a routine of looking for postings and sending your CV. Positive re-evaluation is the best strategy for dealing with uncontrollable stressors. In this case, problems should be looked at as opportunities for growth and learning. For example, reading a document with ugly or complicated handwriting can make it more memorable because we had to work harder to be able to read it. Even if both strategies are successful, our monitor could complain that our progress is too slow, in which case it is time to redefine victory, meaning rethink our expectations. Realizing beforehand that a task may be difficult can help to avoid irritating our monitor when problems arise. Redefining failure. We need to recognize that even failure can have positive results. Knowing when to let go by making a list of 1. The benefits of keeping going and giving up. 2. The costs of keeping going and giving up. It is important to remember that managing stressors does not resolve our stress. These strategies should always be followed by the completion of the stress cycle. Third weapon, What gives meaning to our lives? We can derive meaning from the following things: objectives or results that leave a legacy to future generations, spiritual calling, emotional connection with others. Some people have always known what gives meaning to their lives, while others need time to find out. But the outlook is very different for those affected by the human giver syndrome, because this syndrome makes us ignore our primary objective in life and dedicate ourselves completely to taking care of others. The cure for human giver syndrome is making a commitment to pursuing something that gives real meaning to our lives. Who is the true enemy to beat? Patriarchal society. The patriarchal society that we live in is like a chronic background noise that we get so used to that we don't notice it anymore. But that doesn't mean that it isn't noisy. It can be broken down into the following elements. The impossibility of expressing one's own opinion as much as men do. This system begins in elementary school. Disorientation. Affected by patriarchal blindness, society has a tendency to repeat to women that discrimination is only a figment of their imagination, which makes them doubt themselves and feel trapped and believing that they themselves have created the situation. Human caregiver syndrome prospers in patriarchal society and makes us blind to it at the same time. Feeling of impotence against a society that we cannot beat. Physical aspect required by society, the bikini industrial complex. These widespread problems are minor chronic stresses produced by the patriarchal society in which we live, but in this century are mistakenly thought of as defeated. To defeat the feeling of impotence, we need to do something, meaning we need to complete the cycle. This does not mean that we need to work to completely change the world, but even small actions can help to make progress. For example, buying from shops that are run by women, inviting women to speak first at meetings, and so on. Beating the bikini industrial complex is more complicated because it is deeply rooted into our society, and it moves us to think of our body as the enemy. Strategies. Learn to accept the confusion, handle the contradicting and ambivalent thoughts you have about your body and your desire to comply with social norms with kindness and compassion. We are already halfway there when we realize that the enemy is patriarchal society and not our bodies. Think of your body as the new beautiful. Be kind to your body and redefine its value, accepting the contradictory emotions that you feel towards it. Try and see everyone as the new beautiful, regardless of their body. Try to let go of your prejudices about others so you can also be kinder to yourself. Listen to your body. How to defeat the enemy. There are a few different things that we can do on a daily basis against the elements that cause burnout. Connection, relationships. Even though complete independence from everyone is considered a superpower in our society, human beings are basically social creatures. Nobody can function 100% without any type of human connection. When we create a connection with someone we trust and with whom we share a connected knowing, that is the ability to put ourselves in someone else's shoes, an energy is created that renews us, and this energy is called the bubble of love. There are signals that show us our need to recharge our bubble. When we become disorientated, when we feel that something isn't right in a situation, and we try to convince ourselves otherwise. The best solution is to turn to someone that understands us. When you feel as though you are not doing enough, when you are tired or really angry. Rest. Our body is built to fluctuate from a state of rest to action and then back to rest again. We are not wired to just keep going constantly. The human caregiver syndrome thinks of rest as selfish, since its only goal is caregiving. So rest is seen as an act of resistance against the forces of the patriarchal society that keeps telling us that we never do enough. To make sure that you get enough rest, you can schedule in 6 to 9 hours of rest in your calendar each day, the daily amount that science suggests that you need to recharge your body. Becoming powerful. Accept your fragile side, the one that we call the mad woman in the attic, that keeps telling you that you are not enough. The mad woman is the part of us that continually tries to bridge the gap between who we are and what the caregiver syndrome requires from us. You can take a piece of paper and write a description of your mad woman in the attic. We all have one. Describe her feelings and the moments when she is critical or a toxic perfectionist. Understanding our mad woman in the attic can help us to treat her with compassion. Being compassionate towards ourselves and grateful for who we are helps us to understand the difference between who we are and what the world expects of us without blaming ourselves and feeling guilty. This can be a difficult process because it is shocking and painful. Being strong with all the responsibility that comes with it can be terrifying, but it is our strength that will help us heal our human caregiver syndrome. Quotes: "Wellness is not a state of mind, but a state of action. We are not saying that beautiful is what your body should be. We're saying beautiful is what your body already is." Most of us live our lives learning to believe what everyone else thinks of our body, instead of listening to and believing what our body is trying to tell us. Take-home message. The patriarchal society that we live in is a constant stressor in the lives of all women. We have certain weapons available to us to beat the stress cycle, to create energy thanks to relationships in the bubble of love, and to have an objective that gives meaning to our lives, helping us to overcome the human caregiver syndrome.